Hey everybody, today I'd like to show you my recipe for easy naan breads. It's the best way I know to get close to cooking them without having a tandoor oven. Naan bread is traditionally cooked in a tandoor oven, using charcoal or wood to reach incredibly high temperatures. This method creates the characteristic slightly charred and puffy texture of naan bread. For the ingredients, first up for that authentic taste is half a teaspoon of nigella seeds. This adds the aromatic touch for the taste of naan. A quarter teaspoon of salt, that's about a good pinch. Then 2 teaspoons of caster sugar for the sweetness. We need half a teaspoon of baking powder, this gives us that lovely lift. And we use 1 egg to enrich the dough. Next up, 100 ml of low fat Greek yogurt. And finally, 250 grams of self-raising flour. In a mixing bowl, we'll start by lightly mixing the yogurt and the egg together. Nothing fancy, just a quick whisk to start combining them. The yogurt brings a subtle tanginess and keeps things light, while the egg adds a subtle richness and a depth of flavour to your naan. The egg will also make for a softer, more pillory texture, and it will also make them more golden in colour. Next we'll add the dry ingredients to our mix. There's no particular order for this, but here I'm adding the salt first, followed by the caster sugar that gives us that little sweetness. Next up are the nigella seeds. These will add that characteristic aroma. Our baking powder will get those surface bubbles going when we cook. And last, our self-raising flour. Now we can start mixing the ingredients together, and to start with I like to use a fork just to bring everything together. Once it starts to loosely clump, we can start using our hands. Now here's where things can get a little tricky, and I used to go wrong all the time when starting to cook. Flour can be quite temperamental. You might find your dough is a bit too sticky or too dry. It's because of the humidity. The flour's moisture content can be different even from day to day. This is where I learned the hard way that weights in recipes can be more of a guideline, especially with doughs. Don't worry though, it's easy to fix. If it's too dry, we just add a splash of milk. And now here you can see I've added too much and it's turning sticky. So we just need to sprinkle in a bit more flour. I'll keep adding flour a little at a time until the dough starts to come together like this. Now lightly knead the dough, just enough to bring it together. If you overwork self-raising flour, it will become tough and chewy. We just want it to come together and be smooth and a little springy to the touch. Now it's time to speed things up a little. I like to pop the dough into a slightly warm oven. I ran the oven up before making the dough to 50 degrees Celsius and then I turned it off. This creates a nice warm environment to help the dough relax for 15 to 20 minutes, and this makes it easier to roll out. If you're making them ahead of time, you can just leave the bread in a bowl until you're ready to make them. Take your dough out of the oven after the 15 to 20 minutes and it should have risen like this. The dough will be springy and will leave a small impression when you push your finger into it. That's what we want. Take your dough out of the bowl and lightly roll it into a sausage shape. Depending on the size of the naan bread you want, you can divide it into 4 to 6 portions. For me, I have a family of 5, so today I'll be making that. Set them aside so that we can roll them out. The easiest way I've found to roll these out is to use a clean work surface and a rolling pin. I do not put the flour down. If you roll out on a floured surface, you start to add extra flour and this can dry out the naan bread. Instead, I do a couple of rolls and lift and turn the naan bread over. Do this every few rolls and it will not stick to the surface. I keep going until the dough is about 4 to 5 millimeters thick and feeling like it's going to tear if I keep going. Now for the cooking. I'm just using a cheap, thin based frying pan. You don't need any fancy equipment here. The key is to get it screaming hot. Gently knead the naan bread in a dry pan. You'll see it start to bubble up. We only need it to cook for a couple of minutes on each side. I like to cook these right at the end just before serving so they are as fresh as possible. When you've got a good number of bubbles, take a spatula and gently flip it over and cook it for a few minutes more. Once it's cooked, turn it out of the pan. While it's still hot, brush it generously with melted ghee. And while you can enjoy them plain, for me there really is no substitute. Ghee adds that extra authentic flavour you're probably looking for. And there you have it, perfect quick naan bread, ready to mop up that delicious curry. And trust me, once you've toasted homemade naan, you'll never want to go back to those shop bought ones again. If you enjoyed this recipe, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We're just getting started.